Thank you, Margaret. Let's share the screen. Okay. We got that. We're sharing. Okay. Hold on. There we go. Okay. Let me just wait for that beach ball to stop. I'll give you a preview. The pre-Pesach class is going to be a real winner. There's two fascinating studies that we're going to be reviewing. One is by Rabbi Kaplan, whose work we've been studying for the last year and a half. And he's going to trace Jewish thought from the creation of the universe through the Exodus and beyond. So you get a real perspective on what the Exodus from Egypt meant in terms of God's plan, however you can relate to it, for the world. It's really interesting, and he does it concisely. It's great. That'll put the Exodus and the giving of the Torah at Sinai in perspective, and give some nice added meaning to your Seder. And we're also going to talk about a study from Rabbi Yoel ben Nun, who talks about the practice of Pesach being observed before the Exodus. He's a very prestigious Rav at Yeshivat Har Etzion in the Gush, one of my favorite places that generates great studies in Torah, and it's going to flip your mind. But it's all text-based, commentary-based, so it's very intelligently done. It's really interesting. That's going to be Wednesday, April 6th, starting at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. So that's a week from Wednesday. Okay. Actually, this is wrong. We're not going to compare our study of mindfulness. We're going to start today with mindfulness. We're going to learn about mindfulness and meditation in everyday life. We're going to have an introduction to it, and then we'll get in the subsequent weeks, we're going to give you examples of moving meditation you can do in your everyday life. First, we're going to keep with our deep dive into visualization meditation and get a really firm grasp on that because it is key to how we grow. So just as a short review, Rabbi Kaplan mentioned that in intimacy, a man and woman can visualize. And as we're learning what that means, you'll get an increased understanding of what he's talking about. As we learn about visualization and the importance of self-image in visualization, you'll see that he has a really profound understanding of when a man and a woman connect. How can they actually share a vision? And how does that vision increase their intimacy and their connectedness? So to first understand that, we have to understand what visualization entails. So that's why we're taking a deep dive. He does not go into it in depth. So we're using additional sources, including some of his other studies, to fill in the blanks here. But once we finish this, you'll say, wow, that is amazing. Okay, he did touch on the techniques for visualization. And again, he talked about engraving and hewing. Engraving meaning that you consider an image in your mind to be engraved on the screen of your mind. Let's say it's a letter A, it's engraved. The importance of considering it engraved is that to you, to your understanding, it has a sense of permanence. So if it has a sense of permanence, it's easier for you to say, oh, that A is going to stay there. If you're looking at an image and you see it as having a sense of permanence, it's easier for you to keep it in your mind. Okay, that's the engraving part. And he talked about the tactic of hewing, where other stuff that might come and surround that image, you hew it away, you chop it away, you brush it away, you wipe it away, whatever your technique is, get away. So the importance of this is that you are telling yourself, I'm using certain tools and I'm using certain words that mean something to me to kind of enact this visualization. Engraving means a sense of permanence. Hewing means a cutting away. So I am cutting away extraneous images that come into my mind and which might distract me from that letter A. So we're getting a sense of the power of the mind to use words and techniques that we use in the outside world, to use those same techniques on our inner world when we visualize stuff. Okay, so he got us on the road there. Then we went to Bali Gill, who talked about energizing your vision, which is very key. It's not just a picture on a screen. There's feeling behind it. There's energy behind it. Okay. And then we branched into Maxwell Maltz, talking about cybernetics, and who gave many examples from athletes to musical performers, all of whom are using energized vision to improve their performance. It's not just thinking about throwing successful basketball free throws, it's feeling yourself doing it. And I did mention that I had personal experience with this in a Kung Fu test, where before the test I got to the dojang earlier, and we had to hold these positions for 30 seconds each, 26 times. It's 26 total positions held. And I'm like, I imagine myself doing it. I didn't just see myself do it, I felt myself doing it. I got to relax now. I feel the tension. And then when I did it for the test, I was like, whoa, I could do this. I already did it 2 hours ago. It was an easy. I got it done. I can't tell you how powerful that is. It is just absolutely amazing. So there you go. Okay. Maxwell Maltz did warn us about the snapback effect, where if you do not successfully, if you don't have a self-image in which you believe you could do something, then if you visualize yourself doing something new, you'll snap back and go to the old you. You won't do things in a new and improved way. You'll do it in the old, ineffective ways because you don't believe in it. You have to believe in yourself that this is possible, that you could do this. And you have to be at a point where I can do this. I just have to work out the kinks. I just have to improve my technique. I just have to get out of my own way. I have to be able to relax. I have to be able to breathe. I have to be able to clear my mind. If I do all this stuff, it'll happen. So the purpose of the energized visualization is just that. I am removing this stuff. I have to be relaxed. I am relaxed when I do this. I have to, if I'm having an argument with somebody, I know that I'll make things worse if I get hard on them. I'm picturing myself being softer. I can do soft. I just have to picture myself being soft in this situation, this kind of stuff. Okay, so the importance here was that you believe in it, and you just realized it's just a question of getting the stuff, the blocks out of the way, so you could be the better you. That's what this is about. So the self-image stuff which he introduced is you understanding there is a better you, and you just have to get the obstacles out of the way to be in that person. Okay. He then talked about the circumstances of self versus center, meaning that that's the you inside that has to change. It's not the external circumstances that have to change, because if you're just a bad guy, no matter how many times you change jobs or marriages or whatever it is, you're still going to be the bad guy, and you're still going to have trouble. If you want to be a good guy and have good marriages or good jobs and whatever else, make yourself a good guy. Then you'll have good stuff on the outside. And they all, and he quoted some guys, Prescott Lecky, self-image psychology. They all talk about the importance of controlling the self-image. We then reinforced this idea with Steven Siebold, who talked about metacognition. If you want to change yourself, you have to be aware of your self-thinking, and what are the thoughts and the feelings and the attitudes that pop up that influence your actions. He called it metacognition. We call it what? Mindfulness. Same thing. So if there's certain thoughts and feelings and impressions and ideas about yourself that are driving you to not the best behavior, you get rid of those. You change what's going on in your head so that the thoughts and the feelings and the ideas that are running through it are the right ones to energize the right things. As a side point, I haven't gotten into this, in martial arts, there's a saying, which wolf are you feeding? And it's almost like Yetzer Tov and Yetzer Hara. It's a very similar idea, which means that, you in a simple way, you're looking at the contents of your mind, and there's two things going on. There's some positive stuff which could have positive results in your actions, and there's some negative stuff. So you have a choice as to which body of thinking you're going to feed. If you're feeding the bad wolf, they call it the bad wolf, then you're feeding the negativity, and you're going to be generating hostility and antagonism and trouble and so on in your world, because that's what you're generating. That's what you're emanating. If you feed the good wolf, as they say, then you're going to have better results, because you're going to be doing good things towards conciliation and understanding and harmony and win-win situations. They call that in martial arts feeding the wolf, and it's very much what we're talking about from a Torah point of view of Yetzer Tov and Yetzer Hara. And that's what these guys are talking about. Okay. Now, we also talked about with Maxwell Maltz, being acceptable to you, and that you have to be good in your own eyes. You have to allow yourself to be that person. You have to be your own best friend. And as a side point, I mentioned that this is a really traditional Jewish idea, and we take it on the kahila level, we take it on the group level. And the example I said was like in Yom Kippur, we have the vidui throughout the liturgy. We did this, we did this, we did this, we did this. And there's page after page, we did this, and we did this, we did this. And it's followed by Kiano, it's followed by a declaration. But God, I got your back, you got my back. You're the shepherd, I'm the sheep, the whole bit. It's a fantastic understanding of the psychology that's needed for a group to feel positive about themselves, and to have the positive outlook that's needed to make change. We don't just walk away from that liturgy thinking that we're like no better than a dog. We think, we have a Tzelem Elokim. We think we're the B'nai Israel. We think that we're with the man, because the liturgy helps us understand that we did that stuff, we faced that stuff, like we're mindful, we face all that bad stuff, but you know what? God still has confidence in us, and we got confidence in him. It's just so totally brilliant in its use of this very kind of psychology that Maxwell Maltz and Stephen Siebold and all these other guys are talking about. Okay. This is really good stuff. All right, now to reinforce it, I'm bringing in Matt Furey as a little side thing. Matt Furey, if you might recall, is a world champion. He is one of the best personal growth coaches in the world. He was a former national wrestling champion from Iowa State wrestling powerhouse. He was a world kung fu champion just 7 years after he won national wrestling championship. This guy is it. And he's a guru. He's a personal coach in self-development and personal training to all kinds of athletes and bigwigs, all kinds of people. He's really good. He's got a really good grasp on this stuff. And what he did was, he's a businessman. What he did was he bought the Psycho-Cybernetics enterprise. He bought it. He bought it from the estate of Maxwell Maltz. So he now is carrying on the Psycho-Cybernetics legacy with the same principles we've been talking about. He's the one that's promoting them. It was a great move, and it fits right in with this whole hashkafa, with this whole worldview about what people need to grow. So this is what he says. He says visualization is the wrong word. He's reinforcing what we're saying. One of the most misleading words in self-development is the term visualization. It implies that you use your internal sense of sight with your eyes closed. Right. But truly effective visualization is not purely visual, and it is not necessary to close your eyes to make it work. Consider the star basketball player at the free throw line during the final seconds of a championship game. He must make the shots in order for his team to win. Everything's on the line. He's got to sink that ball in that basket. Does the player close his eyes and visualize when he's at the line? No, but he does see and feel the ball going through the hoop before he shoots it. He may also hear the swoosh sound. That's really true. And you know what? You can sometimes see a guy do that. You can see the intent on his face. He's not sitting there with his eyes closed, like holding the ball. He's like, you can see he's doing it in his mind. That's really clear. And Furey's right. Key point, without the accompanying sense of emotion or feel, visualization does not work. Yes, you see what you want in your mind's eye, but you must also feel it to get results. After you have the feel, you work on adding the sound effects. And beyond that, you can figure out how to include taste and smell. The first order of business, though, is always to imagine and feel. Imagine what you want to see, imagine what you want to feel, and imagine what you want to hear. Although imagination is a much better word than visualization, we do have to use both when explaining the success process. Just keep in mind that when you are visualizing effectively, you are tapping into the power of 3 words, imagine and feel. All right, his point is, I think he'd prefer to use the word imagination. It's the same thing. As long as you understand, you have to feel yourself doing it. It's not just picturing it. Okay, so here again, we have the reinforcement that this is not just a visual process like we're used to seeing. Your energy is behind it. That's what I said before. I had to energize. I had to feel myself holding a stance, holding a position, feeling like, oh, and if I felt it, like, oh yeah, my shoulder is tense, and oh yeah, I got to straighten up. Okay, and I'm thinking this, but in my mind, I'm feeling myself doing this. You could do this. Okay. Now to continue. Now we get to the guts of the matter. New scientific insights into the subconscious mind. And again, we're all doing this because we want to understand what is the internal process that has to take place. What is the relationship you have to have with yourself in order to have a successful visualization? And why are we doing this? It's because, as Rabbi Kaplan says, visualization is one of the key forms of meditation. Jewish meditation, obviously not just Jewish, because all these non-Jewish guys are making $1 zillion promoting the idea. But this is a Jewish thing. Visualization is a Jewish thing. So we're learning how to really get down and do it. All the mechanics about it. Okay. Okay. So what is he saying? We're right here. This is Maxwell Maltz. My exploration of the science of cybernetics convinced me that the so-called subconscious mind is not a mind at all, but a goal-striving servo mechanism consisting of the brain and nervous system, which is used and directed by the mind. So right off the bat, he's challenging the idea of a dual mind, a conscious mind and a subconscious mind. One mind is what he says. The most usable concept is that man does not have 2 minds, but rather a mind or consciousness, which operates an automatic goal-striving machine. He's using the word machine loosely, obviously. This automatic goal-striving machine functions in much the same way as electronic servo mechanisms function, but it is much more marvelous, much more complex. than any electronic brain, computer, or guided missile ever conceived by man. Okay, we have a mechanism. Okay, and just as an aside, I do believe that there's really interesting Jewish thinking, a Jewish study of this by Ethan Dorshav, related to our idea about lave, about what we call heart, which is not really this heart, but heart in our from our dantian up to our chest cavity, where we are, where our self is. So I think I have an article that's going to explain that. So we're going to give a specifically Jewish understanding of this. I think he nails it. But we'll go through this to give you a general idea. The creative mechanism within you is impersonal. So he's saying that the creative mechanism is synonymous with this servo mechanism thing. It's impersonal. It will work automatically and impersonally to achieve goals of success and happiness, or unhappiness and failure, depending upon the goals you set for it. Present it with success goals, and it functions as a success mechanism. Present it with negative goals, and it operates just as impersonally and just as faithfully as a failure mechanism. Like any other servo mechanism, it must have a clear-cut target, objective, or problem to work on. So if you want to end up being a bad boy, you're going to be a bad boy. It's just going to, it's very, very, very similar to like when we talk in the Torah about the 10 plagues. And as we understand, in the first 5 plagues, Paro, the words are that Pharaoh hardened his heart. In the second 5 plagues, God hardened Pharaoh's heart. Why? Because that is the path that Pharaoh chose. God says, you've convinced me. You want a hard heart? I'm going to give you a hard heart. That's what you got. That's the same concept. So Maxwell Maltz's terminology has to do with servo mechanism. From the Torah, we're talking about hardening of heart. Notice lave, we're talking about this. But that's the same kind of idea. So Paro took a path, and however you're going to describe the mechanism, we would certainly say that God has a hand in this, in our relationship with God. However you put it, you choose a path, and you're going to end up staying on that path unless you change yourself, and then you can change the path. But that's what we're talking about. In short, the goals you attempt to convey to this mechanism are filtered through the self-image, and if they are inconsistent with the self-image, they are rejected or modified. So if you picture yourself as a good guy, as a winner, but then you start heading towards a path of being a loser, it's not going to work, because your whole mechanism is going to say, wait a minute, you programmed me to win. Sorry, we're not going to go down that path because the results won't be worth it. That's what we're talking about. By discovering how to alter your self-image, you end its conflict with your goals. Then if you can communicate your goals directly to your creative mechanism, it will do what is necessary for you to achieve them. It's pretty simple. You program yourself for defeat or victory. Like any other servo mechanism, our creative mechanism uses the information and data that we feed it, our thoughts, beliefs, interpretations. Through our attitudes and interpretations of situations, we describe the problem to be worked on. We're here. If we feed information and data into our creative mechanism to the effect that we ourselves are unworthy, inferior, undeserving, incapable, negative self-image, this data is processed and acted on as any other data in giving us the answer in the form of objective experience, self-fulfilling prophecy. When someone we know acts, or when we behave in a way that is astoundingly wrong and wonder why, the answer is basically miscommunication with a servo mechanism. They fed themselves this. The servo mechanism is functioning perfectly but acting on a severe misunderstanding. That's not how we're supposed to be behaving. The servo mechanism is doing exactly what it's supposed to do because you fed it that way. Okay. Okay. In the excellent book, Battling the Inner Dummy, The Craziness of Apparently Normal People, and he mentions these authors, they state, it is apparent that even the most civilized among us have an inner craziness, a potential for irrationality with which we must contend. The computer jargon usually used by computer experts shrugging their shoulders at some wild malfunction is GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. In other words, if neuron channels process enough garbage and link together in a certain way, the outcome or output is garbage behavior. Paro put garbage in. Paro put hard heart in, and he got out hard heart. Like any other servo mechanism, our creative mechanism makes use of stored information or memory in solving current problems and responding to current situations. Sometimes this stored data can remain in control long after any truth or usefulness has evaporated. Okay. Why does that happen? The reason it would remain with us rather than just bounce off like water off a duck's back is what they call limbic memory, or what I, Maxwell Maltz, view only slightly differently as self-image imprinting. This is most controlled by three factors: authoritative source, intensity, and repetition. That's what we've been talking about. Here's where it is in the book. Three sources of influence that through which your self-image is formulated and imprinted. It stays with you until you use these factors to change the image. What we hear from a source we accept as authoritative, such as the father we see as omnipotent, from whom we desperately seek the acceptance of as a child, is given far more weight than the same statements have heard from what is to us a less credible source. What we see, hear, or experience with intensity, such as the father yelling at us in front of others, making us humiliated, has added weight. And what we hear repetitively from authoritative sources has even more weight. Years after this programming has ceased and may still be governing all sorts of behavior because the servo mechanism continues acting upon it as current. That is so interesting. What he's saying is, it's like his experience with women who went through his plastic surgery, and he gave them body beautiful. Okay, but what he's saying is when these women were girls and teenagers, they were ugly ducklings, and everybody said, "Oh, you're so ugly. Oh, you're so fat. Oh, you're so ugly. Oh, you're so fat." On and on and on, and that struck them deep, and it made a big imprint on their self-image. So then now they're 30 years old. They go to Maxwell Maltz, chop, chop, cut, cut, and he makes them Bridget Bardot or whoever, Marilyn Monroe, and they wake up and they're still have that self-image that they formulated through all these mean people repeating, "You're ugly," and they're like, "This stinks. I'm ugly." That's exactly what he's talking about. They're given real world, he's showing the mirror. Look at you. Can't tell the difference between you and Marilyn Monroe. And they're like, "No, I'm ugly." It's because the hold that their self-image has on them is prohibiting them from validating what they're seeing with their own eyes. That's what he's talking about. Another example, Torah example. So you have the spies going out, they're scouting out the land, they come back. Two of the spies say, "Hey, this is great, we can do this." 10 of the spies say, "No way, we can't do it." And they're faulted for giving a negative report, but the whole community is faulted because they fed into it. They're like, "Oh yeah, you're right. We stink. We can't do this. You get the promised land." So it's the whole nation that was made to stay 40 years in the desert because it would take that long to re-imprint the self-image as the nation, as people deserving of God's promised land. That's another example of this. Why did B'nai Israel automatically believe the negative report of those 10 spies? Because they after 210 years in Egypt, they were like, yeah, you're right, we're losers. Okay, can't do it. That's natural, so that's another example of this stuff. Okay, this is really, really crucial stuff. This last point here. All right. So you have to learn, practice, and experience new habits of thinking, imagining, remembering, and acting in order to develop an adequate and realistic self-image, and use your creative mechanism to bring success and happiness in achieving particular goals. Okay. So like we said last week, I think Swellen asked a question. So what are you doing? What you're doing is you're using those three factors of authority, intensity, and repetition to build you a new and improved self-image. Okay? And there's so many ways of doing this. I'm sure you can think of some yourself, but if some guy said that you're not smart, then you go to somebody who you respect that is more benevolent and say, do you think I'm smart? Oh, you already showed me you're smart. Look what you write. Look what you say. Look what look what you study. Some authoritative source gives you a better pat in the back and you believe in yourself. And repetition and intensity. That's why people are always going for these little challenges, whether they're small challenges. I want to do 5 push-ups a day, or big challenges. I want to climb Mount Everest. They're proving to themselves that they are much bigger and better and more powerful than they have been they let themselves believe. And that's how you're changing your self-image. Over time, inside, you believe that you are much better than you think you are. And now you can now you can envision yourself doing something bigger and better because you believe that is befitting of you. So getting back to the real beginning, so if a couple is like trying to visualize some kind of good life together, they got to believe they're worthy of it. They got to believe that they can do it. And then they have a collective vision. All right, yeah, this is us. This is us. Okay, and like I said, we'll get into more sources about this, but this is like liberating stuff. Okay. Okay. Let's touch on Bhante. So we've already covered a pretty good analysis of concentration versus mindfulness. And we've already talked about how you really need to develop the skill of being able to, you're mindful of everything. Oh, I can see and hear everything, but I got to concentrate on the breath going in and out of my nose, mindful of openness, focus, concentrated, narrow focus on what you're supposed to be focusing on, and seated meditation where there's no distractions internally or externally is the environment you need to do this. Internally, I mean you're straight, your body's not bothering you. Okay. But you got to take that into everyday life. You can't just spend 8 hours, 10 hours a day sitting on a cushion. Okay, so what does he say? Every musician plays scales. When you begin to study the piano, that's the first thing you learn, and you never stop playing scales. The finest concert pianist in the world will still play scales. It's a basic skill that can't be allowed to get rusty. Every baseball player practices batting. It's the first thing you learn in Little League, and you never stop practicing. Every World Series game begins with batting practice. That's true. The majors. Basic skills must always remain sharp. Seated meditation is the arena in which meditators practice their own fundamental skills. The game the meditator is playing, game in parentheses or quotation marks, is the experience of his own life, and the instrument upon which he plays is his own sensory apparatus. Even the most seasoned meditator continues to practice seated meditation because it tunes and sharpens the basic mental skills he needs for his particular game. You got to be able to be mindful as you're going out and experiencing the world through your senses. We must never forget, however, that seated meditation itself is not the game, it's the practice. The game in which those basic skills are to be applied is the rest of one's experience. Meditation that is not applied to daily living is sterile and limited. You develop seated meditation skills, to be able to employ them outside. In martial arts, they say the same thing. What you learn in the dojang has to be carried out outside the dojang where there's real challenges. In a dojang, in a martial arts school, nobody's really coming out to kill you, or nobody's really bugging you. You got to be able to take the skills you develop inside and apply them outside. The purpose of this vipassana, this mindfulness meditation, is nothing less than the radical and permanent transformation of your entire sensory and cognitive experience. It is meant to revolutionize the whole of your life experience. This is true. It does. Those periods of seated practice are times set aside for instilling new mental habits. You learn new ways to receive and understand sensation. You develop new methods of dealing with conscious thought and new modes of attending to the incessant rush of your own emotions. These new mental behaviors must be made to carry over into the rest of your life. Otherwise, meditation remains dry and fruitless, a theoretical segment of your existence that is unconnected to all the rest. Some effort to connect these two segments is essential. A certain amount of carryover will take place spontaneously, but that process will be slow and unreliable. You are very likely to be left with the feeling that you are getting nowhere, and to drop the process is unrewarding. So yes, there is naturally going to be some times when you find yourself meditating. Maybe you're driving, maybe you're shopping, maybe you're watching TV. You're like, you find yourself feeling that sensation that you feel when you're sitting here meditating. It happens. But it's not enough, because if you really want it to carry over in your life, waiting for it to happen organically could take a century. You have to actually do stuff. One of the most memorable events in your meditation career is the moment when you first realize that you are meditating in the midst of a perfectly ordinary activity. You are driving down the freeway or carrying out the trash, and it just turns on by itself. This unplanned outpouring of the skills you have been so carefully fostering is a genuine joy. Yes, it gives you a tiny window on the future. You catch a spontaneous glimpse of what the practice really means. The possibility strikes you that this transformation of consciousness could actually become a permanent feature of your experience. You realize that you could actually spend the rest of your days standing aside from the debilitating clamoring of your own obsessions, no longer frantically hounded by your own needs and greeds. You get a tiny taste of what it's like to just stand aside and watch it all flow past. It's a magic moment. And you know something? This idea is very similar to what we have about Shabbat. Shabbat is supposed to be a taste of what? The world to come. It's the same principle. One day a week, we get ourselves a taste of menucha, of cessation from all this creative activity, because the idea is we're whetting our appetite for when the world to come comes. And obviously, there's things that we have to do to usher in Mashiach, usher in the world to come. Even Rabbi Kaplan talks about that. And it's the same kind of thing. This this model he gives for mindfulness says, okay, by sitting on the meditation, sitting on the seat for your meditation, you are developing skills, and then you go into the outside world and you get a little taste of it because, oh, you find yourself meditating. And it's a sense of like, this is what could happen for the rest of my life, what my everyday could be like, but I actually have to do stuff. Okay, we're going to pick up next week on what the stuff is to do. Okay, isn't this interesting? Okay, Margaret.